right, good morning, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, you can post them. Be below the video for our smaller screen, to the right of the video for our larger screen. All right, looks like we got a couple questions in there. So, what are the causes of coming out of posture through the swing? Can you show the body position when the club is impact? All right, I'm a little bit confused. All right, so what are the causes of coming out of posture through the swing? So, it can be a little bit different for everybody, but there's two main causes that I see. And if you are a frequenter of office hours, you've heard this spiel a lot. So I apologize for the redundancy, but there's typically two major reasons why I see golfers come out of the posture. And you're usually most likely you're going to be doing one of or both of these things. So the first thing is coming down steep. So what that means is in the start of the downswing, this club is kind of working more in a vertical position, right? So when it's in a vertical position like this, I'm going to have to do something to get that club to shallow out, right? And what we want to understand is that standing up out of the posture is a mechanism to shallow out the club, right? If the club, if I'm like this, right, I'm in my posture and the club is steep, and then I stand up, look what happens to the club. That club now flattens out and comes in more shallow, right? So a lot of times what golfers are doing is they're reacting to the position of the club, and that reaction is standing up to get the position of the club into a better spot. So that's number one. Number two is an open club face. Golfers are reacting to an open club face, right? So if the face is open when you're coming down, you're going to have to find some sort of way to get it closed. One way to close the face, in a way that a lot of people do it because it feels very powerful and it does get the face more closed, is to early release the club. Releasing the club early is a mechanism to close the club face if the face is open. It's a mechanism to basically get the face from open to square. Lag opens the club face. So if you were to keep lag on the club, stay in your posture and have lag on the club, have more shaftly and an impact, that face would be more open and you would hit terrible golf shots. You may have a great looking impact position, right, where you have lots of shaft lean and you're in your posture, but the problem is that you're going to hit a bad golf shot. That ball is going to go way to the right because the face is wide open. So what golfers will do is they'll release that club to square up the face to get the ball to go in the direction that they want it to go. And when we release the club early, what do we have to do? We have to come up out of our posture, because if we don't, if I were here and I just release the club, I'm just going to stick it right in the ground. So if I'm here, I got to stand up so that way I have room to release the club and I can, hopefully make ball first contact. So those are the two major reasons why people stand up out of their posture, is because they're reacting to either a steep club in the start of the downswing, or they're reacting to an open club face in the downswing. And both of those have the solution of standing up in order to get the ball to go in the direction that you want. So a lot of people don't realize this, is that they're standing up out of their posture as a way to hit a good golf shot. Because if they didn't stand up, I know that seems counterproductive or it sounds wrong, but if they don't change anything else and all they did was just stay in their posture, they would hit much worse golf shots. Standing up out of their posture is a solution to the problem that they have in their swing. So you have to solve the problem in order to be able to stay in the posture. So the where I would go to work on that would be the 20-minute shallowing fix. Because that addresses both of those things. It addresses an open club face by finding a naturally strong grip, and it addresses a steep shaft, right? Because we're working on getting the club shallowed out once you get the face more close. So that's what I'd recommend working on if you're struggling with staying in your posture. Now, if you want somebody to look at your swing and be able to pinpoint and tell you, hey, this is exactly why you're not staying in your posture, I would recommend signing up for the online lessons, because that's where we can give you that. Unfortunately, I don't know the reason why you're not you're not staying in your posture, without seeing your swing. So online lessons would be the way you'd want to go if you want to know for sure what you're doing. But I can tell you there's a good chance it's one of it's either you're coming down steep or the face is open or both of those. There's a good chance that it's that. So working on the 20-minute shallowing fix would be a way to start working toward being able to stay in your posture. To get to that course, you can click the instruction tab at the top of the screen. Then you can click the 20-minute shallowing fix from there. Now, if you want to do the online lessons, you can click the link above the video and you can sign up for the online lessons there as well. If you don't see any spots available, just join the waiting list. Excuse me. Then he goes on to say, can you show the body positions when the club is at impact, right after impact, and finish? Yeah, so I'll do my best here. My back is really sore today, so tweaked it a little bit a few weeks ago and still kind of struggling. But at impact, generally what you're going to see in the best ball strikers is you're going to see the shaft leaning forward, right? Typically enough to where the hands are going to be kind of more in front of the lead thigh at this point in the swing. You're going to see the weight is forward, right? So the weight is forward. You're typically going to see the heel coming off of the ground or the leg banking in. So if you look at kind of Rory, his leg kind of banks in. If you look at most players, the heel is coming off of the ground. It's usually going to be off the ground an inch or two. So most of the weight is on the lead side here. The hips are going to be around 40, 45 degrees open. The chest is going to be around 20, 30 degrees open. But because our shoulders are protracting and retracting, it's actually going to look like the shoulders are relatively square to slightly open and not 20, 30 degrees open. So that's kind of what the impact position looks like. And you can look at the compression line, which is the line that goes from our lead ankle, lead hip, lead shoulder. That's all in a straight line there, just slightly angled away from the target or pretty much straight up and down for an iron, right? That's basically that. If you have any specific questions about any of that, let me know. But that's essentially, I mean, we can talk about the impact position for 5 hours, right? So I'm just kind of giving you the nuts and bolts of what's going on here. So if you have something specific, let me know. But that's generally what the impact position is going to look like. Now, right after impact, that's what we call the release. That's the straight line release. When you look at the better players, you're going to typically see that club releasing. When we say release, what we're talking about is just you're letting go of all the angles, right? So that means that club is going to be basically splitting my arms here. So here I have angles, I have lag, and then I release all that lag, and then the club overtakes my hands, right? So the release is basically when you just let go of all of your lag, right? And where that happens is going to be roughly about 45 degrees out front. And that's just a continuation of after impact. So after impact, I'm going to still have my straight line here. My body's going to be a little bit more rotated. My chest is going to be a little bit more rotated, right? I'm going to be more off of my trail side. My heel is going to be up more because I'm more rotated. Now, as I come around into a full finish, again, almost all of my weight's going to be on my lead side. I'm going to have pretty much straight line going up from my ankle all the way up to my shoulder. I'm going to have my hips pointing toward the target, my shoulders pointing maybe a little bit left of the target. And typically when you see, this can vary. It doesn't have to be like this. There's lots of tour players that have different, kinds of finishes. But generally speaking, you're going to see the finish is going to be kind of like this, where the club is kind of going through the ears when you're looking from that position, right? Now, again, there's some players like Tommy Fleetwood. He basically finishes every swing like this. Some players are, if you look at Colin Montgomery, he basically finished the swing like this, right? There's lots of different finishes. It doesn't have to necessarily be like that, but that's generally what you're going to see in the full finish. All right, so WWCA says, in a recent video by Ronnie showing the box drill, he shows a takeaway, backswing slightly away from my body or from body, and a downswing inside out to avoid hitting the corner of the box. It seemed to work for solid contact with my 7-iron, although chunking it sometimes. Any tips? And does this work on longer clubs like driver? Yes, it works for longer clubs like driver. You just need to get your weight shifted more forward. When you swing more from the inside, your club's going to tend to bottom out more before the ball. So you need to get your weight shifted more forward. A lot of times when people come down steep, they hang back on their back foot. So you put a box there to force the path to be from the inside. And if you still hang back on the back foot, you're going to tend to chunk it. So a shallow swing it matches up well with a good weight shift to the lead side. An over the top swing matches up well with hanging back on the back foot, right? So if you were to come over the top and shift your weight forward, well, you would just chop way down into the ball, right? So you want to shallow the club out and get a good weight shift forward. So I'd be working on getting your weight shifted to your lead side. So Hugh says, good morning, Q. For some reason, I am pulling my short irons, frustrating when my approach shots are missing greens left, when my driver long and mid irons are straight with no pull. I do have a bad right hip. I'm a right-handed golfer. Could that be hurting my turn when bent over and leading to be more arm swing down? Help. It's driving me crazy. Well, you could just aim right. Just aim to the right and pull it to the left if that is the case. But if you're pulling it to the left, basically what's happening is you're coming over the top, right? Now the hip could be part of it, but you need to swing. You either need to align your body the way you are now and swing more from the inside, or align your body to the right and just come over the top and pull it. That's fine to do as well. You just gotta figure out whichever one works best for you. So Diane says, hi, Q. I was practicing Clay's recent video on getting lag. He says, slow the swing at the top and then let it swing faster through the club. I was trying that. Any tips? Yeah. So basically, if you start fast here, you're going to throw it out. So I try to feel like you're patient and you're letting that club load up, and then you're letting it go kind of at the bottom of the swing. That would be what I'd be trying to do if you're working on lag. So Jeff says, when in greenside bunker with little to no sand, how do you play it? So you play it very, very similarly. You just take less sand. So basically, when there's a lot less sand there, if it's kind of like a hard sand or firm sand, the club isn't going to dig as much. So like in a fluffy sand bunker, the club's going to tend to dig. So you want to use the club in a way that's going to make it dig less, right? So that'd be like using the bounce, opening up the face a ton, right? And that's gonna use the bounce, right? Whereas if you were to do that off of a hard sand bunker, like a firm sand bunker, it may bounce off that sand and then you may end up scolding it. So you want to let the club dig to get underneath the ball a little bit. So you basically just open up the face a little bit less, right? You're going to hit a little bit closer to the ball, and you're not going to need to swing quite as hard because you're going to be catching more of the ball, right? So because you're not hitting as much of the sand. So it's the same way you hit a normal sand bunker. Open up the face, hit behind the ball, but you're just going to do those things a little bit less, right? So open up the face a little bit less. To help you dig into the sand a little bit more, because you're not getting as much sand, you're going to swing a little bit softer because you're catching more of the ball. Definitely something I would practice. So WWCA says, when in the sequencing of the swing should we be shifting weight onto the front foot? Start early. So generally, it's going to be happening about halfway back in the backswing, right? So I'm here. So if you kind of think about it, I'm going to be about 50-50 at address. As I start my backswing, I'm loading up on my trail foot around in this area here. And a lot of it depends on how long your swing is. So like John Daly has a very long swing. John Rahm has a shorter swing, right? So, John Rahm's going to be getting to his lead side a little bit sooner than John Daly is, right? Because he has more time, because John Daly has more time to get there because his swing is longer, right? So, but generally it's going to be about halfway back. That's about when you're maxing out the load in your trail foot. From here, you're starting to move. So let's say it's about 75-80% pressure in my trail foot, about in this area. Then as I get up to the top, I'm moving pressure into my lead foot, and I'm going to be about 50-50 at the top of the swing, right? So now I'm going to be about 50-50 at the top of the swing, and then I'm going to continue to increase that pressure in my lead foot as I come down to impact. So it starts about halfway back in the backswing, very much like throwing a ball, right? So when you throw a ball, you're going to load up, and then your arms are going to start moving back, and you're going to start shifting forward, right? Your body's going to be moving forward. You're shifting your pressure to your lead side as your arms going back. Same thing's going on in the golf swing. My arms are going back. I'm shifting pressure into my lead side. All right. Keep the questions coming if we got them. So Diane says, when do you use your legs on pitch shots? Does it depend on the distance you're going? I mean, you use your legs on all pitch shots. I mean, you're using your legs on every single shot that you hit. I mean, believe it or not, when you're putting, you're also using your legs, right? You're using them to brace, right? Now they're not necessarily moving around and twisting around everywhere, but you're using them to brace, right? You wouldn't be able to rock your shoulders back and forth if you didn't have the foundation of your legs. So you're using your legs on every single swing that you make, right? Imagine if you were suspended in air, right, and you were trying to swing a club, right? Imagine they put you in one of those, like in a theater production where they harness you up and then they lift you up. Imagine trying to swing a golf club, from that position. You have to have something to brace against. So you're using your legs no matter what swing you're making, whether it's putting, chipping, or pitching. You're using your legs in all those sequences. So now the legs are, moving around more in other swings, right? But we're using our legs in a pitch shot as well. And a lot of it does depend on how far it is, right? So if it's let's say it's like a 50-yard pitch shot for me, that's going to look, something more like this, right? So you can see how my knees are unlocked, my hips are unlocked. I'm just turning my chest back and through, right? For a 20-yard pitch shot, right? It may be more like this, right? My legs aren't moving as much because I don't need to bring the club back as much, right? So what I like to focus on for pitching is really focusing on moving that chest back and through, and whatever I need to do with my body to let my chest move back and through. That's what I'd be focusing on. So focus on letting that chest move back and through. And you will more than likely need to, the longer the swing is, the more you're going to need to use your legs to move your chest. We got about 35 or so minutes left. We've got some more questions. Looks like we got one from Fixer Guy. Says, after working through the shallowing fix, I find that even with a weak grip, I draw my low irons, and as I get into my high irons and woods using a strong grip, I still have a fade. Yeah, so basically what's what's going on is your face is open when you hit a fade. So you need to get the face stronger. So there's a couple ways to do that. One would be with a stronger grip. If you're already using a stronger grip, then you need to use stronger wrist angles. So I would imagine with your longer irons and woods, you might be cupping your wrist. And sometimes this happens because you're trying to create a longer swing to get more power with those longer clubs. I see this all the time. And when we hinge our wrist more, you may tend to cup the wrist more in order to get the club to hinge, right? So if I keep a flat wrist, that's as much as I can hinge the club. But if I cup my wrist, I can hinge it more, right? But if I cup the wrist, look what happens to that club face. That club face gets open, right? And you can use a strong grip, but if you really cup that wrist to try to create length in the swing, then that club face may be open and you may slice everything. So I would try to keep that wrist a little bit flatter. I would look at your swing, see if you're kind of cupping the wrist to create that, because that's more than likely what's going on there. So Jeff M says, when hitting a flop shot, would you recommend coming across the ball, or do you want to try to get the club ahead of the hands at impact? Well, you don't want it necessarily ahead of the hands, because that's going to typically lead to hitting behind the ball, but you want it to be pretty vertical to very little shaft lean, right? So open face, and then your impact position should look kind of more like this, right? So you can see very, very little shaft lean. The reason why you would want the hands to be slightly ahead is because that's going to help you to be able to make good contact with the ball. Because if you imagine if I did this, right? My club is going to bottom out over here. If I want to hit the ball here, right? If I'm trying to hit this ball and I come in and I do that, right? My club's going to bottom out here. Well, I'm going to hit so far behind the ball, I'm not going to be able to make contact with it, right? So I want it to basically bottom out where the ball is. So I want this club to basically be releasing at the ball, right? If I'm trying to hit a flop. So I'm trying to get as much loft on it as I can, right? So there's going to be a very, very small amount of shaft lean there, or the shaft's going to be very vertical at that point. But you don't want to try to, if you get the, now what I will say is that feel isn't always real, right? So if you're someone who has plenty of shaft lean, right, in your normal swing, then you feeling like you're doing this may actually result in this. And that's a lot of what golf is. Golf is a game of adjusting your feel to get the desired result that you want, right? So if you're someone who has plenty of shaft lean in your normal swing, you're hitting these flop shots and you're trying to release the club at the ball, but in reality, your flop shots kind of look like this, right? Where you have too much shaft lean, then you may need to feel like you're getting the club head ahead of the hands, right? Tiger talked about this, because a bunker shot's basically a flop shot. Tiger talked about this, when he hits bunker shots. Tiger, he feels like he's doing this. If you look at him hit a bunker shot, he's obviously not doing that, right? He's not doing this coming into the ball. He's coming into a bunker shot and he looks like this, right? But that's him feeling like he's doing that, right? So you don't literally want to do that, but you may need to feel like you're doing that to get the desired result that you want. So Anthony V says, what are some reasons I may lose swing speed outside of turn, higher hands, and backswing? I've been working on better turn and higher hands in the backswing, videoing my swing to make sure, and can't seem to get above 100 miles an hour in my swing. Well, the biggest reason why a lot of people lose club head speed is because of loss of strength and loss of flexibility, right? That's typically what it comes down to. Because as we get older, we lose muscle mass, we lose strength, right? We're not as strong as we used to be, and we're also not as flexible as we used to be. We're also not as strong through the full range of motion. So that's typically why people lose club head speed. So yeah, but that doesn't mean you can't gain club head speed as you get older. Excuse me. You can train all those things. You can train. It sounds like you're working on the right things. Trying to get a bigger turn. But maybe there's some things that you have never really done in your swing that you can be doing now to gain club head speed. So that could be using the ground more effectively, right? Maybe you've always been able to swing 100 miles an hour, but you haven't really used the ground very well, right? So working through doing the sumo step drill from the 20-minute distance fix may help you to use the ground more effectively, and may help you to recoup some of that speed that you've lost. Also, our neurological system tends to run slower. Basically, especially if you've never really trained it to swing fast. When we're younger, we tend to swing faster, more often. So our neurological system is more trained to swing faster. Whereas when we get older, we tend to not do that because, it might be because we're afraid of injuring ourselves, or maybe because maybe you already have a nagging injury and you don't want to, have it any further. Right now I hurt my back a few weeks ago. I played in a tournament this weekend, and it was, I had to really tell myself, okay, I have to swing slow, because if I were to swing hard, I would probably hurt my back even further, right? And I actually did tweak my back a little bit later in the tournament, and really had to tell myself to slow down, and kind of limped my way in. But that's what it comes down to. So it could be you also some things in your swing may have changed over the years, right? If you start casting the club, if you start getting some things that kind of, start out really slow, but then over time, it, may have been just small things that have changed in your swing. But if those small changes keep happening over time, it can add up to a big change. And, it was maybe not very noticeable to lose like a mile per hour every couple months. But then you add up, several years, and you have all those mile per hour that you've lost over those several years. Well, now that's adding up to maybe like 10 miles an hour, right? And, over the course of, 5-10 years, and, that could be part of it as well. So there's lots of reasons for it. But I'd say the two main ones are losing strength and losing flexibility. Those are typically what it comes down to. So what I'd recommend doing is working through the 20-minute distance fix, because those are all the drills that we know that help people to get more club head speed. So if you're looking to get more club head speed, I recommend checking that out. Click the instruction tab, then click the 20-minute distance fix from there, and start working through those drills. But you're definitely on the right track with what you're, the higher hands and the bigger turn, because those are like the two main things that can help you to get more distance. But you can make your turn look exactly the way that it did, when you were 20 years younger or whatever, but you still may not have as much distance because you may be as stronger at that time, right? So it's not always just about getting the swing to look the exact same. There's other elements in there too. All right, we got about 30 minutes left. So Hugh says, can you suggest a drill for weight shift? Yes, the best drill out there for weight shift. I'll actually suggest two of them. There's two main drills that I prescribe to people when they're struggling with ground contact, which would be the reason for the weight shift. One is the chair drill. So this is where you would take a chair and you'd place it outside of their hip. And what you'd want to do is you'd want to create a little bit of a gap between your hip and that chair. A lot of people struggle with getting a proper weight shift to the lead side because they slide their hips too much in the backswing. So I'm going to exaggerate, but basically a lot of people are like this at the top of the swing, right? So if I really slide my hips this way in the backswing, or if I move my hips at the top of the swing, if my hips are farther away from the target than they were at address, then typically that's going to make it very, very difficult to have a proper weight shift for a couple of reasons. So one is that if my hips are over here, they're much farther away from where they need to get to. My hips need to get to here. So that's a long way to go. You're going to really have to slide your hips a ton in the downswing to get there. The other reason is that my leg is at a disadvantage. It doesn't have any leverage. If my leg's straight up and down like this, it's hard for me to push in that direction. Now, if my leg is more at an angle, it's a lot easier for me to push in that direction, right? So what we want to do is we want to have a little bit of a move with the hips away from the ball. It's fine to have a move away from the hips. All we're doing with that move is to shift pressure into the trail foot, right? So we need to get pressure early into that trail foot. People are just shifting that pressure way too late and for way too long into the right leg. So what I would like to see is I like to see players shift their hips kind of right away to start the backswing. It doesn't need to be much. It's literally like an inch. If you watch me, it's like an inch. That's all I'm moving. You're only moving your hips enough to put pressure into your right foot. Once you do that, then you want to push that hip back and around, right? So now you can see my hip is moved back and around. Now I'm in a great place to where I can really move into my lead side very nicely from here. If I'm like this, I'm going to have a hard time moving into my lead side. If I'm like this, it's going to be a lot easier. So the chair drill, again, if I grab my chair, is a good one to work on this. Put a chair outside of your hip. It's going to be touching your hip to start. You're going to start the backswing. You're going to nudge the chair. You're going to move pressure into your right foot. Then you're going to push that hip back and around. You're going to create a small gap between your hip and the chair at the top. Generally, it's going to be about a hand thickness of a gap. That's what you're going to create there. And then from there, you're going to continue to move down. You're going to move your hips away from the chair. So that would be one. A lot of times that just gets people in a great position to start with, right? You don't even need to really, that just makes the weight shift more automatic, just doing that drill in and of itself. But let's say you're creating that gap at the top, but then you still come into contact flat-footed, you're hanging back, and you're kind of doing this action. If that is the case, then I recommend the step drill from there. So the step drill is where we start with our feet together. We throw this club back. As we throw the club back, we're stepping forward. So you need to get comfortable with your body moving forward toward the target as you're moving up to the top. It's very much like throwing a ball. If I were to throw this ball, right, my arm's going to go back as my body's going forward, right? That's the same thing that I want to do in the golf swing. So you would start out, feet close together. This is no ball, feet close together, just getting that motion, right? And then from there, I would do normal practice swings where you're trying to replicate that same motion, right? So club's going back, body's going forward. I'm getting pressure into my lead foot early, right? And then you would try it with the ball from there. So Jeff M says, you said that distance loss could be due to loss in strength. What body parts should we work on to try to retain swing speed? That's a good question. That's not really my area of expertise. I'm not like a personal trainer or anything like that. Probably be a better question for someone who's like a fitness golf professional. But what I do know is um, really anything that's core, that works on your core strength, that works on your leg strength, and works on your arm strength, that's going to help you to create speed, right? So core, arms, and legs, I know that pretty much covers everything, but I would say core and legs are probably the biggest ones, because that's what you're using, that's what you're pushing up against the ground to create speed. But it could be different for, I can imagine, again, I'm not a professional as far as the fitness industry is concerned, but I would imagine it could be different for everybody, right? Some people may have very strong legs, very weak core, very weak arms. That person may benefit from doing more arm, strengthening the arms and the core. Some people might have chicken legs, that don't have much. They can't push off much with their legs, and maybe they have a strong core, but their arms are kind of weak, and maybe they just need to work on more. So it's hard to really know, but I would say if you work on a full body kind of training, you should be able to retain some strength. I would recommend talking to a fitness professional to know exactly what you need to work on specifically for you. I try to find somebody that's in maybe in the golf space that um, knows specifically what you should do to help you get speed for golf. I'll tell you, I do general weight training. I lift weights. I don't do anything that's necessarily specific for golf, but I know that it does help with golf. Now, sometimes you have bad form and you tweak your back, which is what I did, which isn't ideal for golf. And hopefully I can heal up soon and get back at it. But I know when I'm stronger in the gym, I'm stronger in my golf as well. I had, I tend to swing faster and things like that. So yeah, definitely recommend doing some weight training, not only just for golf, but just for general health. It's you know, it's a good thing to do. All right, we got about 20 minutes left. If we have any more questions. So Jim B says, can you contrast the difference between the swing for a driver and a fairway wood? Yeah, it's well, I guess it depends on how you're hitting the fairway wood. So if you're hitting the fairway wood, like you're hitting off of a tee, you can hit it the exact same way you hit your driver, basically. Now, it won't be teed up as high and it won't be quite as forward in the stance. Now, you could hit it that way, but you're opening yourself up for there's not a ton of margin for error there. Because the a fairway wood face is not as tall as a driver face. So you wouldn't want to tee it up really, really high. But you can hit up on it the same way you would with the drivers, right? So for driver, we're going to have a fairly wide stance. We're going to have the ball forward, generally off of the lead shoulder. It's going to be teed up to where about half of the ball is above the crown of the club, and you want to hit up on it, right? So your impact position is going to kind of look like this. You're hitting up on it, right? Now, for a fairway wood, you can do the exact same thing, just not quite as far forward and not quite because it's not going to be teed up quite as high, and you can still hit up on it a little bit and be able to get kind of a higher launching, low spin fairway wood shot. Or you could hit it the same way you would hit it off of the fairway and just tee it up to give yourself what would be like a perfect lie in the fairway. And if you're doing that, your ball position is going to be a little bit more back because you're going to be hitting kind of more down on the ball just a little bit. And it's really just the ball position and where you're striking the ball. The swing itself really isn't going to be that much different. It's all about where you're striking the ball. So you can either, have it more forward in the stance and hit up on it, or you can have it more back in the stance and hit a little bit more down on it. It's, the advantage to hitting up on it a little bit is you're going to get a higher launch, lower spinning. It's going to go farther, right? So if you're trying to hit your fairway wood as far as you possibly can off the tee, then I would hit it very similar to the way you hit your driver. Just tee it up a little bit lower, a little bit not quite as far forward in the stance, and hit up on it. But that's generally how I hit a fairway wood if I'm hitting it off the tee. But if I'm wanting to take a little bit off of it, I want to have a little bit more spin, then I'll play it just like I would off the ground. I would just tee it up just a little bit just to give myself what would be like a perfect lie. And then I hit down on it just a little bit to get a little bit more. It's not going to go quite as far and it's not going to go quite as high because it's going to be a little bit more spinny. But it's going to be, it's going to come out lower and won't go quite as far. So Lee M says, can you discuss the pros and cons of a wide versus narrow stance, which is appropriate for what irons? I know a wider stance is best for a driver. So basically, the wider your stance is, the more you can shift your weight, right? So that's why you want to have a wider stance with a driver, because I can shift harder in that direction and that direction, right? Generally, the only time you really want to have a narrow stance is with like a pitch or a chip shot. Because the reason why you'd want to have a narrow stance for those is so that way you can keep your low point a little bit more consistent, right? So when your feet are wider, that's going to promote more of a weight shift. When your feet are closer together, there's going to be less of a weight shift there, and the bottom of your swing is going to be a little bit more consistent, right? So for a little pitch or a chip shot, I don't need power, right? I need more, finesse. I need more, consistency of where my ground contact is. So having the feet close together, because I don't need to make a powerful swing here, it just makes it easier to control the bottom, right? Now for a driver swing, the bottom of my swing can be a little bit off and I'm still going to be fine, right? It's more about creating power in the swing. So for a driver, I generally like to see inside of ankles about shoulder width apart. That doesn't mean that you can't be better wider or a little bit narrower, but generally that's a good place to be. That puts you in a good position to be able to shift hard into your right side and shift hard into your lead side. And then also the reason why we want to have a wider stance with the driver is to be able to stay behind the ball more. So if I have a wider stance, I can push against that more to stay behind it. If I have a narrower stance, when momentum gets moving this way, it's going to be harder to push against because my leg is more straight up and down, right? If my leg is at an angle, I can push against that and stay behind it better to be able to hit up on it, right? So for an iron, what I like to see is generally about middle of the ankles, about shoulder width apart, right? So it's a little bit narrower because we don't need as much of a power shift, but we also need to be able to get our body forward a little bit, right? So if we're really wide, it's a little bit harder to get our body forward because when you're pushing against, you're going to be pushing your body back. If we're a little bit narrower for the irons, I want to get my body forward because I need to have the bottom of my swing to be in front of the ball. So I don't want to be so wide that I can't get my body forward in order to do that, right? So that's generally what I would say is pitches and chips, club head or so apart with the feet. That's where I'm at. So it's probably about a club head and a half with the feet. That's usually about how far I get. If I get a little bit far, if I have like let's say I have like a 60-yard wet shot, my feet will get a little bit wide. They'll get progressively wider as I get to like a full swing, right? Uh, but around the greens, 30 yards and in, this is how far my feet are apart, right? Because all I'm doing is this, right? I don't need to have it's not a big swing, so I don't need a big base to be able to shift my weight and stuff like that. And then for a full swing with iron, basically anything that I'm hitting off of the ground, I'm going to be middle of the ankles, about shoulder width apart. And then for driver, I'm going to be a little bit wider. I'm going to be inside of ankles, about shoulder width apart. So Lee M says, perfect, thanks. The narrow stance seems more stable for irons, but explains why I'm probably not shifting weight properly. Yeah, you don't want to be too narrow because then you may be kind of sliding. You won't be able to produce power. You still want to be able to produce power with your irons, right? We don't need as much power, but we still want to be able to hit our irons plenty far, right? So you just don't want to be so wide that you can't shift into your lead side. So you got to find that happy medium. That middle of the ankle, shoulder width apart, that's generally a good place for most people. You may find that it's a little bit better for you to be a little bit narrow, a little bit wider. You kind of have to work through that yourself to find what works best for you. But that's middle of the ankle, shoulder width apart is generally what I recommend. All right, we got about 10 minutes left. If we have any more questions. So Marco V says in video 1.3 golf swing speed stretch the wall drill at position P2. I see a vertical club head and not parallel to the spine. Spine angle. I am always practicing to keep the club head parallel to the spine angle, at least at P2. What should it be? I mean, it doesn't. To be honest, it doesn't really matter that much. It only matters where the club face is at impact. So if having your club face matching your spine angle at P2 allows you to have it in a square position at impact or the position that you want it to be at impact, then great. If having it open at P2 or vertical at P2 helps you to do that, then great. It really doesn't matter. I wouldn't get too caught up in the details of where the club face is The farther away it is from impact, the less it matters. So P2, position 2, for those of you who aren't familiar with that, that means club parallel in the backswing. It matters way more at P6, right? That's where it really matters the most. As far as coming into the ball. So wherever your club face is at P2, as long as it's square at impact, it does not matter. The club face can be wide open. I mean, if you're bringing the club back and your club face is like this, and then you come into impact and it's in a great position, it does not matter. So I would focus on whatever position at P2 that gets you in a good impact position. That's the position to be in. Can you talk about shot shaping, fade versus a draw? Yeah, in order to hit a fade, the face has to be open to the path. The path needs to be out to in, face open to the path, but close to the target, right? So if you want to put degrees on it, right, you could say that your path needs to be, if your path is 4 degrees to the left to hit a fade, then your face needs to be 2 degrees to the left. That means that it's going to be 2 degrees open to the path, but 2 degrees close to the target, because the ball's going to start in the direction of the club face, right? So in order to hit a fade onto the target, I need that my ball to start to the left for a right-handed golfer, right? So I need my path to be left, my face open to the path, but close to the target. For a draw, it's just the opposite. For a draw, I need my path to be into out. I need my path to be out to the right. In order to get the ball to draw, the face has to be close to that path, but it has to be open to the target in order for it to start right of the target, right? So if you want to put numbers on that, you could say if your path is 6 degrees into out and you want to hit a draw onto the target, your face needs to be 3 degrees open. That makes it 3 degrees open to the target, but 3 degrees close to the path. That will produce a ball that starts to the right, roughly about 3 degrees to the target, and then works to the left. Now, there's lots of ways to do this. There are lots and lots of ways to hit a draw and hit a fade. The ball does not matter how you set up or how you do it. The ball only cares about what's happening at impact. The ball only cares, okay, is the face closed? Is the path open? All that stuff. That's all it cares about. So for me, I can tell you what I do for me to hit a draw and hit a fade. Me personally, draw is my basically my natural ball flight. That's what I do. I basically kind of do it in my sleep for the most part. I have a little baby draw on almost all my shots. When I hit a ball well, it's going to have a baby draw on it with my irons. My driver, I tend to fade my driver a little bit. That's kind of my go-to with the driver, but with an iron, I tend to draw. So anything I hit off the ground is going to tend to draw, right? So for me to hit a draw, I set up with my feet square. I swing the club from the inside, so my path is a little bit into out, and then my face is a little bit close to my path open to the target. Ball starts a little bit right of my toe line, then curves to the left. Now for a fade, what I do for a fade is I'll set up my body to the left. This gets my path to the left, and then I hold off the face through contact. So generally, I let the face kind of roll over a little bit to get the face close to the path. But if I set up to the left and I basically take the same swing, I'm just going to hit the ball left and left. It's going to start left and it's going to draw, right? So in order to get the face open to the path, I hold the face. I don't let the face turn over. I hold that face, right? So I try to hold the face at the target. That gets the ball to start, a little bit left of the target and then curve back toward the target. That's how I do it. But if you're already a slicer of the ball, that's probably not going to work for you. You might be the opposite, right? You may be someone that kind of naturally hits a fade, and then you may need to feel like you swing, line your body way to the right and shut the face down through contact to get it to draw. Everybody's going to be a little bit different when it comes to that, but that's what has to happen at impact. In order to draw, the path needs to be in to out relative to the target, right? The face needs to be closed to that path, but open to the target to get the start to the right, curve to the left for a fade. Just the opposite. The path needs to be going out to in. The face needs to be open to that path, but close the target to get it to start to the left and curve back toward the target. So John A says, I've been taking the TSG course for a few months now and find myself jumping all over the place. What is the best way to logically proceed through the course for a golfer like me who is mainly interested in learning how to properly swing the club, i.e. not particularly interested in improving distance? I do not recommend jumping around all over the place, because what ends up happening is that you end up spending a lot of time and working really hard, but you don't really get a lot out of it because you hadn't taken the time to do the reps to ingrain anything in particular. So what I recommend doing is starting in the stable fluid spine and work through level 1. Do not do anything else. Now you can work on different parts of your game, right? You can work on, chipping, putting and stuff like that. But for the full swing, just stick with that. And get to where you're doing that. Get to where that's second nature, and then you move to level 2, right? You pass the test. You do the thousands of reps that we tell you to do. Once you do that, if it's second nature, then you go to the next piece. Now, there's 2 ways you can work through the system. You can work through it where you go stable fluid spine, then you go level 1, level 2, level 3, then you go to power turn, level 1, level 2, level 3. Or what you can do is you can do stable fluid spine level 1, and then you go power turn level 1, then you go to lag level 1. You can work through it either way, but I would just stick with, don't jump around everywhere. I know we make it all available to you to do that, but I did just not do that, because what's going to end up happening is you just end up jumping around and working really hard, spending a lot of time, really kind of wasting time is essentially what you're doing. You're wasting time and effort because you're not taking the time to think of it this way, like a musician who you start learning the beginning of the song, and then you're saying, hey, I want to play one song really, really well. Well, that would be like going and learning the beginning, one verse of one song, then going to another song, learning another verse, then going to another. You're never going to learn the whole song. You're just going to learn parts of songs, and then you're going to have a harder time coming back to it, because you spent time doing everything else. So stick in one area, work through that, put in the reps. And then once you put in the reps and it's second nature where you're doing it, you don't even have to think about it. So for example, if you're doing the stable fluid spine where you're angled away at the top, you're not sliding or anything, and you're coming into contact, you're getting more angled away. If you're doing that now, you're doing that without even thinking about it, because you put in the reps. Now you're ready for the next piece. Because if you just put in a couple reps and then you go on to the next thing, well, you're just going to go back to what you were doing naturally before, because you hadn't trained yourself to do it. You gotta stick with it and train. You have to train it. Otherwise, it's just not gonna, it's not gonna stick. All right, we'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. Thanks everybody for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to y'all next time.